Hey everyone, you're with Noor here, and welcome to this week's video where we're going to be going over why AI won't fix your broken operations and what actually will. Now, if you've yet to have the displeasure of meeting me, I'm just going to give you some background. I had the privilege of running the operations for a company called Imperium Acquisition for over 4 years, which was ultimately an 8-figure info company. During that time, I helped the company scale from 100k a month all the way to 700k a month cash. And being able to oversee the operations at the different growth stages, help grow the team from a team of 5 to a team of 40, supported fulfillment across 4,000 clients that range from coaches, consultants, marketing agencies, and course sellers across various verticals. And above all, I built the systems that help the founders scale without becoming the bottleneck. Now, the purpose of the channel that you see today is ultimately designed to help other 6 to 7 figures coaches, consultants, and info product owners build businesses that can scale without them, expand my network beyond the corner of my living room. At the moment, I'm actually in my childhood bedroom as I'm back here for the holidays, and finally build goodwill before I inevitably try to sell you something. The game is the game, and no apologies will be given for that. Now, preemptive disclaimers before we get into the video. My voice is pouring as shit, so my magnesium plus these videos will fix your apnea. That is not medical advice. That is just a humorous suggestion there. I'm an absolute rambler, if you can't tell already, working on that. And there's no magic fix-it, get-rich-quick pill in these videos. Message me if you find one. I've been searching for 8 years. Now, usually we do a quote of the day before the start of all these videos to prime your cognitive function as you're going through it. Today, I completely forgot a quote, so we're going to keep it nice and simple. Persistence pays, so keep persisting, and eventually you'll get paid. So as cheesy as that is, I'll leave you with that, and we can crack on with the video now. Now, let's get into it. The reason this video exists is because of the fact that for most founders, everyone who typically has an operational problem is being sold the same answer, which is AI at this moment in time, okay? At least at the time of recording this. Your delivery is inconsistent, someone will tell you use AI. You're drowning in admin, someone will tell you use AI. Team asking too many questions, use an AI agent. Can't keep up with client communications, automate it. This pitch is everywhere, and it's extremely seductive because it promises the one thing every overwhelmed founder wants, and that's leverage without the boring work. Now, here's the truth. AI is an amplifier, it's not a fix, okay? Point it at a clean, documented process, and it's genuinely transformational. Point it at the mess most businesses actually run on, and it does exactly what hiring into a broken system does. It scales the breakage faster, cheaper, and with nobody to hold accountable when the output is wrong, okay? So here's the thing. You can't automate a process you have never defined, and that single sentence is pretty much the whole video summed up, okay? Most founders are buying AI tools and they're trying to skip the systemization step, and AI has quietly become the most expensive way ever invented to avoid writing a simple SOP. So this video is going to show you exactly why AI fails in unsystemized businesses, where it genuinely creates leverage, and the sequence that decides which of those two that you actually get. Because the bottom line is, in simple format, AI will amplify what you already have. So if you have a mess, it's going to amplify that mess. If you have, a wonderful foundation from an operational standpoint, it's going to amplify that foundation even further, okay? It's either garbage in, garbage out, or gold in and even more gold out. That's the best way to look at AI here. Now, in terms of what this video covers, we're going to be going over specifically why it's an amplifier, the pattern that I've personally watched from, being inside an 8-figure info company, as well as advising hundreds and hundreds of clients every single week during my time there, the confident mistakes at scale problem, the agent objection, which is answered, and that's to do with, why AI agents figure out the process themselves, makes the argument stronger, not weaker, why automating a bad process makes the bad process permanent, the accountability gap, why AI needs the same clarity a junior hire needs, so actually treating AI as if it's an actual hire, as opposed to something that you can give, a one-line instruction to and thinking it could work miracles when it sadly can't, okay? At least not without the initial foundations. Where AI genuinely creates leverage, because again, just to clarify, this is not an anti-AI video. The sequence that you want to approach AI with, which is to do with defining, stabilizing, and then automating, and why approaching the use of that is non-negotiable. Triaging the AI you've already bought, and the AI readiness audit to give you an understanding of whether you're actually ready to leverage AI in your business, because believe it or not, there's no point using it if you're about to amplify a piece of mess without you even realizing. Now, this video becomes relevant, or this topic in general becomes relevant, basically the moment you start looking at AI as an answer to the operational problem rather than an accelerator of something that's already working, okay? Specifically, if you're about to buy or build an AI tool to fix a process that's currently messy, or you've already bought AI tools and they quietly did not change much, okay? Alongside this, if you're being sold on AI agents replacing roles in your business, your team's inconsistent and you're hoping automation will standardize them, and finally, you want the real leverage that AI offers, okay? If any of these sounds familiar to you, you're ultimately in a good place here in the form of this video, because we'll be going over the things to actually avoid on your end, okay? Now, here's what you're going to be able to see differently after this, at least I hope you will, okay? So the difference between automating a process and defining one, why the same tool transforms one business and does nothing in another, that AI failures are usually process failures wearing a technology costume. This is a big one because, again, you implement a shiny solution only for it to be wearing a shiny costume, and that solution is actually a big problem. And speaking candidly here, it's a pile of shit. So that is something to be made very aware of, because in the current market stage we're in, every single tool looks appealing when in reality there's only a handful that actually does what you may need it to do. Now, why AI is closer to a hire than to software, and where the genuine leverage is, which is often not where the marketing of AI points, okay? Now, the decisions this should help you avoid. It will help you avoid buying AI to fix a process that you never documented. It'll help you replace a role with an agent before the role was ever systemized. It'll help you avoid believing an AI demo that was built on someone else's clean data. This is a massive one. The amount of people, guys, that I see try and replicate how other companies in their respective field use AI and end up with completely different results, and then they go, oh, why didn't that work? It's because how someone else uses it is completely different to you, because their AI, when done correctly, they would have fed it with a lot of context and data. And that data is a foundational pillar from an operational standpoint in which they would have gathered before even actually touching AI. When you skip to using AI without the appropriate data and infrastructure in place, you'll get a mess, irregardless if you use it the exact same as a successful company that's using it, okay? Super important stuff. It also helps you build custom tooling before you have a defined problem for it to solve. I've literally seen this the other week where I was advising an offer owner where they pretty much have everything housed under an AI tool, but transparently speaking, from a client experience standpoint, it's absolute dog shit having everything housed under one tool. And transparently speaking, it doesn't solve any problems. If anything, it's created more problems from a client experience standpoint, which is going to result in churn and an all-round bad customer journey, okay? So again, it will help you avoid similar stories to that, because you may get shiny object syndrome and build things that you don't need, and it's important to actually gauge whether there's a problem for you to solve and whether AI can solve that problem. It'll help you avoid we use AI as a strategy. It's an input, not a position, and the market stops rewarding it the moment everyone has it, okay? Just because other people say, yeah, we use AI for this, it doesn't mean you should use AI, because the people using AI, the business owners that I know that have leveraged AI to the maximum potential, they actually had solid business acumen pre-AI, and they had a solid infrastructure in place, which was then amplified with the use of AI, okay? And that's something that AI can't come in and magically replace. And finally, it will help you avoid automating your quality standard before you have agreed what good looks like, okay? Because whatever you lock in from an AI standpoint, it tends to become permanent, and this is something that people don't realize. Now, AI is an amplifier, it's not a solution, okay? And it's important to not skip this part, because everything else that I go over in this video, it practically follows from it. Now, a business with a clean, documented, understood process is a business where AI is genuinely extraordinary. You know the inputs, you know the steps, you know what a good output looks like, so you can have a defined job to a machine and check its work against a standard you already have. That is where the real leverage is, and it's where it compounds. Now, a business with an undocumented, founder-held, inconsistent process gets the opposite. There's no defined input, no agreed standard, and no way to tell whether the output is right. So AI produces volume with no quality control, and every problem you've already had gets bigger and faster. It's the exact same principle as hiring. If you add a person to a broken system and you do not get leverage, you don't get leverage, sorry, you get management overhead. Add AI to a broken system and you do not get leverage either, you just get what do you call it? You just get the mess produced at a higher speed with no one to correct it. Okay, so the bottom line is, if you mirror AI against hiring an actual human, the fundamental principles stay the same, in the sense that if you plug them into a broken system, it's just going to amplify the brokenness. Okay, even though the technology changed in the sense that, right, because we may not need humans here, we can just plug AI to it. The actual structural rule didn't. So if you're in an area of your business in which it genuinely doesn't need a human, okay, but the next thing to look at is, right, how can we actually integrate AI here? It's not always as simple as plug and play. The actual structure and how you're plugging them in needs to mirror how you would plug a human in with the appropriate context, or it's going to amplify something that's broken. Okay, again, it's an amplifier. Neither creates AI is an amplifier and a hire is an amplifier. Neither creates the thing it amplifies, unless you hire someone on a leadership level who's coming in with previous background and experience to redesign and restructure the whole ship. Okay, now I'm gonna give you a real example here, because I've actually lived this exact failure from the inside. Okay, so one thing we actually done in the past, in the previous company I was in, was that we replaced a human setter with an AI one, and it was basically automated DM setting. Okay, every time someone joined the community, AI would open the conversation, qualify, and move them along. On paper, this was the perfect use case. You're thinking it's high volume, it's repetitive, and a human setter is expensive at scale, and therefore with this solution we can do it at scale for a fraction of the cost. Everyone was initially excited because everything looked good. We had the fancy dashboards, the fancy automations, the idea of removing 5 to 6 setters and removing the bloat and replacing it with a tool. Everything was lining up. But here's what actually happened. The people who built it were handed an undefined process, because the setting process that we wanted to implement, it had never been properly documented for the strategy that we were going to execute that would have been in alignment with how the AI is designed. Because here's the thing, what we did have documented required heavy human involvement, and it was very back and forth orientated, which required human behavior and an understanding of human behavior, which a trained setter could do. Whereas with AI, unfortunately, it's not necessarily the best at that, in which it can gauge human behavior and actually give responses that doesn't seem like you're speaking to GPT. So what we had done when we actually plugged this AI in, we tailored our approach, but the tailored approach and the tailored process, it was never vetted or it was never proven, because we were adjusting it for the AI specifically. Okay, so now what happened here was that with the actual build itself, AI was following this unproven, unvetted process, which, even though it had minor tweaks, it was still of great significance, which ultimately led to the communications and conversations not yielding similar results that the humans once did. Okay, so what essentially happened here was that the AI was basically plugged and played, but humans kept having to step in to rescue conversations or fix errors, and on top of that we were losing a lot of sets. Okay, and then we done the honest maths, and then here's the punchline here. The time our humans spent intervening, monitoring, and course correcting the AI, not to mention members of the leadership team, was roughly what it would have taken for a human setter to just run the inbox in the first place, even if it took 3, 4, 5 people, whatever it may be. So we basically automated a role and kept the labor. Okay, so we didn't buy leverage. We bought a machine that needed a babysitter, and the babysitter was the person that the machine was supposed to replace. So really do the math in that, guys, where this whole thing is stemmed from us looking to make things more efficient, only for things to be even more inefficient than they were and to yield way worse results. Okay, so we got caught up with shiny object syndrome here because we thought, yeah, this can replace a setting team. Now the intent was perfectly fine. It's just that we kind of shot the gun early here, in the sense that we thought this would be, you know, an instantaneous fix. Not instantaneous, sorry, but, you know, be a simple fix, when in reality that wasn't the case at all. Now again, the AI in question wasn't bad. It did exactly what it was told. The problem was that nobody could say in writing what it should have been told, because the process, number one, it only ever existed inside the humans actually doing it, but when we tweaked it so that it operates in alignment with how the AI is supposed to function, that process itself wasn't proven, and therefore we were just playing the guessing game, and as a result, we failed playing in that game because it resulted in a lot of human intervention. Now, could we have eventually figured it out at the end? Probably, but to be transparent, with the amount of manpower and, you know, intervention that was involved, we were more than happy to revert back to human setters, because that was proven to work at scale, and there was no point, you know, fixing something that wasn't broken. Okay, now here's why AI breaks without a defined process. Okay, and here's the mechanical reason, and it's worth being precise about. Any automation, AI or otherwise, it needs three things to work, and that is a defined input, a defined process, and a defined standard for the output. That is not AI limitation, it's the nature of delegation itself. A junior hire needs exactly the same three things. In most unsystemized businesses, all three are missing. The input varies depending on who is doing it, okay? The process lives in the founder's head and changes based on context and judgment. And nobody has ever written down what good actually looks like, because the founder just recognizes it when they see it. So when you hand that to AI, it will do something. It will produce output. But there is no way to know whether the output is right, because the standard it should be judged against does not exist anywhere except in your head, which means you end up reviewing everything personally, which means you are now the quality assurance layer for a machine as well as your team. So bottom line is the fact that you're going to have someone to congratulate you because you just bought a tool and you made yourself busier, okay? And you may be thinking now, but AI agents don't need a defined process anymore. Now, let me take on the strongest version of the counter argument, which is this, because this is one of the most common, you know, pitches that you're probably seeing in this whole AI and automate your business stuff. And if I dodge it, the sharpest people watching it will rightly dismiss everything else, okay? The pitch goes, that was last year's AI, i.e., you know, GPT workflows, Zaps tied to NAN and all this stuff. Modern agents don't need a documented process. They reason. They figure out the steps themselves, hand them the goal, they work out the how, so the whole defined first argument is outdated. Now, here's what the pitch gets right. The agents genuinely are better at improvising a process. That part is real because there's been significant advancements in place where if you feed it with data and you prompt it correctly, and by prompt, I know it's an agent, I essentially mean set it up correctly with the appropriate infrastructure at the start, then it can definitely start to learn how to actually improvise and build things on the spot without much, you know, adjustments down the line or involvement down the line. But this is where it actually skips. The process was never the hard part. The standard is. Even if an agent can work out its own steps, you still can't judge its output without knowing what good looks like. And that knowledge doesn't live inside the agent. It lives, or it doesn't, in your business. And the reason why I said it doesn't, because some of you guys don't even know what good looks like and you're skipping to a bloody agent. Now, again, I have the privilege of having such an incredible network of 6 to 7 to even 8 figure, you know, business owners that have AI agents in place. And again, the best, you know, businesses that are functioning with AI that I know of, right? They are fully aware of what good looks like from a standard standpoint, okay? They know what great looks like. They know what horrible looks like. They know what bad looks like. And as a result, they know exactly if their agent is functioning as it should. Meanwhile, you've got business owners that are plugging in agents, thinking that their business is now efficient, when in reality, they don't know what good looks like, so they assume what's being shown to them is good, when in reality it's dog shit. And that's because they've never actually stopped and paused to gauge what the standard should be for the different things being automated, okay? Now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to play it forward, okay? You hand an agent an ambiguous goal in an unsystemized and business, sorry, it improvises a process and produces output. Is the output right? Right by what measure? If you've never defined the standard, one of two things happens here. Either you review everything personally, so you're back to being the quality assurance layer, and the leverage, the presupposed leverage that you thought you're buying into is fake, or you don't review and you've just delegated the definition of good in your business to a tool that has no stake in your clients, your reputation, or your margins, and that will confidently pick its own answer. That second option is worse than the old failure, not better. The old automations failed visibly. They broke, things errored, you noticed. An agent improvising in an undefined environment fails invisibly. Everything runs, output flows, and the standard quietly becomes whatever the agent decided it was. What's even more funnier about this is that even the business owners that I know that have built it up upon proper foundations and their agents are absolutely firing on all cylinders, they still have someone in place to do light QA just to make sure that the agents are doing what they need to do. But then you have some other business owners who have not set the standard accordingly, yet they don't have anyone to QA these agents, and their agents are running around willy-nilly across all functions of their businesses, making it inefficient and dropping the quality across the board without them even realizing. So no, the agent error doesn't retire the argument that we're making here. If anything, it sharpens it, okay? The better the tools get at improvising the how, the more the entire game concentrates on the one thing they can't improvise for you. And that is what good looks like in your business. So the checkability test survives every model release because it was never a question about the technology. It's a question about you and what you perceive to be good and bad in your business, okay? Now, this is the part founders underestimate, and it's where the real damage lives, and that is to do with confident mistakes at scale, okay? Because when a human is unsure, they hesitate, they ask, they flag it, and that hesitation is a safety mechanism that you've relied on for years without noticing, and it's the reason bad work usually gets caught before it reaches a client. Now, AI does not hesitate. When it's handed an ambiguous process, it produces a confident, plausible, well-formatted answer, and it does it 100 times before anybody notices the answer was wrong. There's no uncertainty signal. The output looks just as polished when it is right as when it is nonsense, okay? So you don't really know what's what. So you can imagine here, even in an unsystemized business, AI does not just make mistakes, it makes confident mistakes at volume in your own voice, by the way, to your clients with nobody flagging anything. So a human doing that job wrong makes one mistake and probably asks a question first, okay? A new hire comes in, makes a mistake, you course correct, they get better, whatever it may be. An automated process doing it wrong makes it 400 times before Friday, because depending on how batshit crazy you've gone with AI, you can fucking send it balls to the wall and it can quite literally cause your company to collapse without realizing, okay? Now, the absence of hesitation is a feature when the process is clear and a serious liability when it is not. I'll give you a real example of this, which is a bit of a silly example. I had a friend and, a wonderful business owner in my network who bought like a bunch of Mac Minis, and he was setting these Claude bots up, and his Claude bot just started buying some random shit from LV using his credit card, which was insane. And the same thing happened to my mentor, where my mentor's Claude bot on the Mac Mini was purchasing flights and whatnot. But that is just wild, ludicrous examples where, because they were just testing and they were just playing around with it, right? With no sort of seriousness behind, using it as a fulfillment model or anything like that. They just wanted to play with it. But because it wasn't set up with appropriate guardrails and having standards in place, it just went apeshit at scale, okay? So you can imagine how detrimental that can be if it was a real business function where it was to do with fulfilling for clients at scale, communicating with clients at scale. It can go extremely left if, things aren't situated accordingly here. Now, automating a bad process makes it permanent. And this one is subtle and it costs businesses years, okay? And let me just zoom in here quickly. Now, a messy manual process has one redeeming quality. It's easy to change. Someone doing it by hand notices it is stupid and adjusts. Improvements happen naturally because friction is visible to the person feeling it. The moment you automate it, that stops completely. The process becomes infrastructure and it's now embedded in a tool connected to other things with a cost attached to touching it. Nobody feels the friction anymore because nobody's doing it manually. So the flaws stop being annoying and it starts being invisible, which means they stop getting fixed. So you've not just kept a bad process, you've preserved it and you made it expensive to change. Now this is why the order of things matters so much. If you automate a good process, you're able to then lock in quality. You automate a bad one and you lock in the bad, and then you build on top of it for 2 years before anyone questions the foundation. Now here's the accountability gap as well. When a person owns a task and it goes wrong, there's a conversation, a correction and a lesson. The system improves because a human is accountable for the outcome. When an automation owns a task and it goes wrong, who's accountable? In most businesses, the honest answer is nobody, or the founder by default, which is the same thing as nobody. The tool did what it was told. The person who set it up moved on, the client got a bad experience, and there's no feedback loop that turns that into improvement. Now, this is the quiet reason AI implementations decay. Nobody owns the output, so nobody notices the drift. So quality slides slowly until something breaks loudly enough to be noticed. Now, I've lived this one too, in the sense that, we used to have an automation handling a part of client setup, provisioning new clients into the CRM when they came on board, and it was tied to the reps as well for whenever they closed someone. The person who built it, however, was external, and when they moved on, ownership of the automation moved on with them, and it was transferred to nobody, and it kept running, which is exactly the problem. An unowned automation doesn't announce that it's unowned. It just runs and runs and runs until the day it doesn't. So we found out what had gone wrong only when it broke loudly enough that we felt it on an operational level. Okay, so the automation here, it didn't fail suddenly. It's just been unowned for months, and the failure was just the moment we noticed. Now the fix is simple and it's almost always skipped. Every automated process still needs a human owner, not to do the work, but to own the outcome, review the output on a defined cadence, and be accountable when it drifts. Automation changes who does the work. It does not remove the need for someone to own it. And when the person who built an automation leaves, ownership gets explicitly reassigned that week, not discovering missing at the worst possible moment. Now, here's where AI genuinely creates leverage. Again, this is not an anti-AI video like I mentioned earlier, and I want to be direct about that because the leverage is real when it's pointed at the right things. Now, AI works brilliantly where the process is already defined and the standard is already clear. Some of the highest return uses I've seen, in service-based businesses include the following: documentation itself. Now, this is the great irony here. AI is superb at turning a recorded loom or a messy voice note into a structured SOP. So the tool that everyone wants to use to skip all systemization is actually excellent at doing the systemization. Now, one critical caveat, because I've watched this go both ways. AI, given real context, which is your recording, your walkthrough, your thinking, your way of operating, all these different things, it produces a genuinely strong SOP. When AI is given nothing, for example, write me an SOP for client onboarding, it produces something that looks like an SOP and contains no thinking at all because the founder had no idea what it should consist of and it outsourced the thinking itself. Same tool, opposite results, and the variable was the context given, not the model. An SOP generated without your thinking in it is the skip the thinking failure wearing a documentation costume, which is a bit of a wordful, but I'm sure you get the drift. And here's the receipt here. This very training was built that way because I use AI heavily in producing these documents, and the reason the output holds a certain standard is because everything I feed the process before and during allows me to produce a doc like this that's in my voice, and it contains the depth of information that I require it to contain. Okay, I provide it with all my resources, my tone of voice calibrated, my real stories and examples injected, and constant course correction with my own operational knowledge when a draft misses. Okay, so when it comes to the process, the AI would draft, I would direct, and I would strip all the context away and ask it for a training on AI and operations. I would strip all let me circle back here because this is another thing. where if you go out reading it at the pace I am here, you stumble across your words, which AI sadly can't fix. But if you do know a tool that can fix that, message me. I was going to say, if you strip all of the context away that I've just described here, and I were to simply ask it for a training on AI and operations, you'd get the same confident, thin, generic, nothing SOP founders get, okay? So the tool itself, it didn't make this video good. At least I hope you're finding it good and you're finding it valuable. But the context I provided with my years of experience and my brain is what helped me make it good, okay? And this is the entire argument of the video, ironically demonstrated by the video itself, because I myself used AI to design this video and all my other YouTube videos, where I'd spend, hours just going back and forth to ensure we cover everything, remove anything that doesn't necessarily make sense for my ICP, simplify things where needed, add additional context, add additional layers. I literally voice note back and forth with Claude specifically, and from there, after a few hours, we get what we need. And over time, transparently speaking, it takes less and less time because of the context I'm continuing it to give every time it produces a final document like this, which is of a good quality. Now, if I didn't do all that, and like I said, I done a basic, give me a training on AI, not fixing operations and whatnot, you'll get a very basic document and you'll be able to suss me out very quickly, because I'll sound like I have no idea what I'm talking about, because the information would be so brain dead basic, okay? And it's nonsensical for you to even read a document like that because of how simplified it actually is. So hopefully that makes sense. And this is something I'm very passionate about, because again, the videos that you're seeing here today and all the YouTube videos, it's a prime example of documentation and what you can do provided you provide it with the right context. Another good use case is summarizing and structuring call notes, client updates, meeting outputs, define input, define output, low ambiguity. Okay, so here's another thing. When it comes to summarizing and structuring, I've got various projects in place for each of my advisory clients, where it's fed with call notes, client updates, whatever it may be, and it's my internal fulfillment base where everyone is looked after from a client standpoint, because it's being fed the appropriate data across projects. First drafts inside a known standard, content, replies, proposals, where a human owns the final quality check against the standard that already exists. This is a super powerful one, especially if you're operating at scale and you naturally have a lot of customers who may email you. Rather than having a human handle it, you can plug in an agent that is connected to your Gmail, drafts a response, and all you have to do on a human level is say yes or no, or give it feedback on how to adjust the message. This is something that we actually set up at my previous company towards the end of my tenure, and the bot was built off of my 4 years experience leading an account recovery team, dealing with all the fires, refunds, and client issues. And now the bot's able to handle everything itself. Data work, pulling, sorting, reconciling, and reporting numbers where correctness is checkable. Super important. You never really want to let AI do all of this on its own. You always want a human to use it to speed things up, because at the end of the day, again, even though as accurate as AI can be, nothing will beat a human, in my personal opinion, where they are doing the checks with a tooth comb in terms of how bloody granular they get and how detailed they get in terms of their checking and whatnot. In short, humans are very, very careful when they QC things. And finally, structured, repetitive, high volume tasks where the rules genuinely do not change, and that's where AI can come in and amplify. Now, and the flip side here is that the places to keep a human in the loop, no matter how good the tooling gets, basically anything that requires genuine judgment, context, and empathy. Okay, account recovery is my go-to example, because I spent years doing it manually, and some of those situations were extremely complex and needed a human in place, as an agent wouldn't be able to read the situation properly. So for example, a client in a hard spot, a payment that failed for a reason that actually matters, a conversation where the wrong tone loses the relationship alongside the cash. Even where AI assists in that work, a human has to be the one wielding it. Empathy heavy, judgment heavy, relationship carrying work is not an automation target, it's an augmentation target, and confusing the two is expensive. Comes back to the Firebot I mentioned when it comes to the bot producing a draft, but then a human being in place to verify that draft to ensure if it goes through or not to the next stage. Now, notice the pattern here. Every one of these is a case where you can tell whether the output is right. That is the actual dividing line, not how clever the tool is and not which model it runs on. Can you tell quickly and objectively whether the output is correct? If yes, automate it confidently. If no, you have a definition problem to solve first before you touch any tool, okay? Now, the best way to look at training up an AI or setting up correctly is to mirror it against a junior hire in terms of what it's needed, okay? And this is the reframe that makes all of this practical. You want to stop thinking of AI as a software and start thinking of it as the fastest, cheapest, most tireless junior hire that you'll ever bring on. One that never gets bored, never pushes back, works instantly, and costs you almost nothing. And exactly like a junior hire, it needs a clearly defined outcome, not a vague task. It needs a documented process to follow, an explicit standard for what good looks like, extremely important here, examples of strong and weak output, and a human who owns the result and reviews it. Everything you know about why a junior hire fails in an unsystemized business applies here identically. You would not hand a brand new junior an undocumented process and no standard, no examples, and no oversight, then be shocked when that work was wrong. That's exactly what most AI implementations are. The good news in this framing is that the work required to make AI genuinely effective is the same work that makes your business scalable anyway. Defining the process, setting the standard, assigning ownership. You are going to need all of it regardless. AI just raises the return on doing it. Now, this is the sequence that you want to follow, and this order decides the outcome every single time. Define. Document the process, the inputs, what good output actually looks like, concretely enough that someone else could judge the work without you. Now, if you cannot write down the standard, you're not ready to hand the job to anything, human or machine. Stabilize. Run the process manually or with a person long enough to know it actually works and to shake out the obvious flaws. You want the process to be good before you make it permanent because automation is preservation. For example, what the account recovery unit I led when it came to responding to issues and queries, that was built off of 4 years of manual stabilization from yours truly who had to deal with all those nightmares. And now a bot deals with it. And then finally, automate. And now hand it over with a human owner assigned to the outcome and a review cadence on the output. So this is where the leverage compounds instead of the chaos. Now, almost everyone tries to start at step 3. That's the entire reason AI disappoints in most businesses. It's not that technology is overhyped, it is that it was pointed at something undefined and no tool has ever been able to fix that. And just so you know, this isn't a theory, here's the other side of the AI setter story. You know, the time I ran the sequence properly and it worked, okay? I spent roughly not even 3 years, sorry, this should say 4 years, and again I'm repeating the same story here, where every client fire, every failed payment situation, every hard conversation handled by hand across 4 different processes and evolutions of the process in place on my end whilst I was overseeing the account recovery side of things. Okay, so this was literally years of edge cases, judgment calls, pattern recognition, all of it lived experience before any of it was a system. I then systemized it where I extracted the whole thing into my own methodology. What gets said, when, how situations get read, what the escalation logic is, what good handling actually looks like, all of these different things. Only after that, with the process defined and the standard explicit, did I build the automation. A bot that monitors the inbox in isolation and handles the files without a human need to be involved. Now, this needs to be corrected because, again, this is another example of AI. I can produce the work to a good level, but then you need someone to intervene and QC parts of it. And I should have QC'd this before. But a very small correction, I didn't build it on a technical level, but I built out the blueprint which needed to be had for this to be built out. So I basically gave our AI engineer who works at the company everything that the bot needed to do based on my year's experience, the word track, the conversation tracks, what to say, when it's triggered, etc., etc. And then he built it, okay? And now it works because it's got nothing to do with the tool itself, but because of the manual years that came first. So the bot isn't improvising an undefined process, it's executing a defined one built from thousands of real situations that taught me what the process should even be, okay? This should actually be hundreds. So again, you're seeing in real time here, Claude having, one or two mistakes over the doc, and also catching me out because I should have done even more thorough QC. But again, this is great with the fact that this is in the video because you'll see minor examples of AI in play here, where majority of the work could be fantastic, but it still needs a human touch to make sure that it's fully polished off. Now, the exact same category of tool, it was the same tool that failed as the AI setter succeeded here. So that story I gave with the AI setter and the tool that we leverage and whatnot, that failed, and that the only difference was the order that we went in when it came to leveraging AI. Okay, that one automated a process that nobody had defined, whereas this account recovery process, it was already defined because I'd spent 4 years defining it. Okay, same technology, opposite outcomes, and the variables was never the AI. It was whether the thinking had been done before the automation arrived. That's the sequence proven both ways. Now, you're probably wondering, what about the AI you've already bought? Okay, chances are you're not deciding whether to adopt AI. You've already got it, subs running, few automations live, maybe a build in progress, and a vague guilt that you're not using it properly. So let's deal with the mess that you're actually in, and not just the purchases you haven't made yet. First, put up a number on it. Add up what you're currently paying every month across AI tools, subscriptions, and anything being built. And ask one question of that total. Which of these has changed a measurable outcome in the business? Not feels useful, not the team likes it, a number that actually moved. Okay, hours genuinely freed, an error rate down, a cost line reduced, output up with quality held, whatever it may be. For most founders, the honest answer is that the spend is real and the outcome is a shrug, and seeing those two side by side is a whole wake up. Then you want to do a triage here. You want to run every live automation and tool through the same readiness test from the exercise below, just pointed backwards. Okay, so it passes where you define process, clear standard, checkable output, human owner, keep it, and it's probably one of the few things genuinely earning its cost. Okay, if it passes. Now, if it runs on an undefined process, pause it, not cancel, pause. Define the process and the standard underneath it, then switch it back on. You'll usually find it performs completely differently once it's automating something real. Nobody owns the output. Assign an owner this week or kill it. Okay, an automation with no owner isn't leverage. It's unsupervised risk with a subscription fee. Nobody can say what it's for. Kill it today. That one was never a tool. It was a purchase that felt like progress, and I've seen this plenty of times. This usually cuts the stack down hard, and that's the point. A smaller set of automations sitting on defined processes with named owners will outperform a sprawling stack of unsupervised ones every single time and cost you less doing it. Now, a couple of implementation rules to look at here. Never automate a process that you cannot describe in writing. If it lives in your head, it is not ready, document it first. Define the output standard before the tool. If you can't say what good looks like, you can't judge what the machine produces. Fix the process before you preserve it. Automation locks in whatever quality exists on the day you automate it. Assign a human owner to every automated process. So important. They're not there to do the work, but to own the outcome and review on a cadence. Only automate where correctness is checkable. If you cannot tell quickly whether the output is right, you're buying risk and not leverage. And use AI to build the systems, not to skip them. It's the highest return use in most business. Its highest return use in most businesses is helping you document faster. Okay. Now, what this will prevent, and hopefully it will prevent this, provided you follow it accordingly. The expensive nothing, in the sense that subscriptions and build costs that quietly change no outcome, confident mistakes at scale, permanently embedded bad processes, the accountability vacuum, which is to do with automated work that drifts because nobody owns that result, and the skip foundation, in which it prevents you from using tools to avoid systemization that would have actually fixed the problem. Okay, now here's the outcome here. If you get this right, AI will stop being a line item that made you feel modern and starts being genuine leverage within your organization. The processes you automate are the ones that are already clean, so that output holds. Someone owns each one, so quality does not drift. And the work you did to get there, when it comes to defining processes, setting standards, assigning ownership, is the same work that makes your business scalable with or without any tool. And the founders getting real leverage from AI right now are not the ones who adopted the earliest, okay? They're the ones who had defined operations before they adopted anything. AI did not fix their business, it multiplied a business that was already working. Super important. At this moment in time, I actually have a client in which I connected them with a vendor in my network, a trusted done for you vendor in my network, who's now building out these fancy automations and spreadsheets and, you know, all the tools and resources that we need. But before we even touch tools, we are working in alignment to actually make sure that we got the appropriate infrastructure in place before we plug in AI where it needs to be plugged in. Okay. Now, this is an exercise I want you guys to follow if you are thinking of, you know, buying, building, or automating anything else. Okay, just run the process through this, because this will give you a rough understanding of whether to actually plug in AI or not, with 1 being not at all and 5 being completely. So you list out the process that you're trying to automate at hand to begin with, and then you go through these 5 questions. Documentation. Is this process written down clearly enough that someone else could follow it without me? Scale from 1 to 5. Standard. Can I state exactly what a good output looks like, specifically enough for someone else to judge it? 1 to 5. Checkability. Can I tell quickly and objectively whether an output is correct? So stability. Has this process run consistently and well in its current form, so I'm not about to preserve something broken? And finally, ownership. Is there a specific person who will own the outcome and review the output on a defined cadence? Okay. Now, these are the scores that you can use for reference here. If you're between 21 to 25, automate it, because the foundation's there and the leverage will actually be real. If you're between 13 to 20, proceed carefully. Fix the weak scores first, or you'll automate the gaps along with the process. And if you're under 13 score here, you do not automate, because you do not have a tooling problem. You have a definition problem. Document the process and set the standard first, and you'll likely find that the automation is simpler and cheaper than you expected once you can see the process clearly. Okay, so that's how to actually go about using AI to fix or amplify operations further, as opposed to thinking that it will be a magic wand and fix everything instantaneously, when that sadly isn't the case, unless you have a proper infrastructure and foundation that has been built upon years of manual labor. Okay, so that is it for the training. That is why AI won't fix your broken operations and what actually will. Now, if there's anything you want covered next, leave a comment below. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram, as that is where I'm most active. And if you're new here, the video cadence is usually once a week, depending on brain capacity and various obligations. So yeah, hold me accountable. That's that. If you have any questions, most active on Instagram. And if you guys need help with systemizing your operations and ultimately removing yourself from the business on a founder level, feel free to pop me a DMing me advisory, and I can assist you further. But yeah, that's pretty much it, and I'll catch you in the next video. Cheers guys, bye.